Is that working? You hear back there, guys? Yeah. Okay. So now what happens is that he's sentenced to death, and what should have happened was that within a month he was sent here, and he would have been executed. His parents would have gotten that lovely little yellow telegram that said, "Your son has died in a non-battle related incident." But that didn't happen. So back in Ohio, his parents had a neighbor that was listening to the radio, and the neighbor heard that this soldier from Ohio, Private William Harrison Jr., has been convicted of raping and murdering a 7.5-year-old girl in Northern Ireland. She runs across the street and she tells them. So what we have deduced that has happened is that they panic. This is their only child. They go, and somebody must have suggested to talk to their congressman. So along with the congressman, they come up with the idea that they're going to file for executive clemency request for President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now this would have been December of 1944. Roosevelt has just won his 4th term, and he is getting ready for his inauguration in January. But what the public did not know was that he was dying of congestive heart failure. So his activities were very well managed, and so he has, of course, he's got meetings to have with Churchill and Stalin, which actually happened in February. So they decide they're going to go to the White House, and they're going to file for executive clemency. It is the first case of executive clemency to come to this White House. So they show up in Washington with their congressman, and I found a record at the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Presidential Library, which was 45 minutes away from my house. That seems to be a magic number. And I go in and I get a research pass, and I start looking for additional documents, like in addition from the transcript. So I find several documents. What I found was the usher's diary. I would have shown it, but it's very light and faded and whatnot. But what it shows is that Eleanor Roosevelt has an audience with them January 18th at 5:10 to 5:20 p.m. And they state their case. There's something must be wrong with our son. He can't be sane if he's done this thing. Please, we want to talk to the president. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt was an incredible force of nature in the United States. She's still very much revered, and she did a lot of work for her husband because he was in a wheelchair because he contracted polio from a drinking fountain at a Boy Scouts camp in Camp Fabello, I think, in Canada. Anyway, so he's in a wheelchair, and so they talk to her. They think she's going to go and she's going to convince the president to not have her son judiciously killed. So this is the first request, and this becomes a big problem for the White House and the Judge Advocate General's office, and they proceed to bombard the White House with requests and paperwork and letters. And Mrs. Harrison writes letters, which are in the trial transcript, which are very upsetting because she lies and she says, "Oh, my poor, frail, anemic son, who he's just doing his patriotic duty." Really? Okay. So, and she clearly didn't know the extent of what happened because they would not send her the trial transcript. Harrison wanted that transcript that he got a copy of to go to his parents. And this is another sign of his psychopathy. If he knew he was sitting in prison, he had time to read that. If he knew that description in his confession details what he did to this little girl, why would you want your parents to read that? But he said, no, they have to have it so they can defend me. So they're bombarding them. They try to portray him as this poor victim, and more infuriatingly to me is that she said, Well, the little girl's mother must have trusted him to let her go. So she's maligning our grandmother, kind of like, it's her fault. Victim shaming, as we call it. So the next slide is, this is directly from the transcript. And basically what this says, because I know you can't read it, it says that this is, Henry Stimson was the Secretary of War for FDR. And what he says is, don't think about it, because it's going to open up an avalanche of requests from across the European theater of operations, and we don't want this to become a pattern. You will establish a precedent, which will open a floodgate, and let the final decision be Eisenhower's. It is his. He's going to uphold that sentence. And what he does when this starts to happen, he gets a letter and he says, no, I don't find any mitigating circumstances. This guy deserves to die. I'm not changing the verdict. But I will withhold executing the sentence until the president makes his decision. So I found a document at the FDR Museum that said, it was in 1943, FDR did an executive order stating that he wanted to be consulted on every death penalty case coming from the European theater. So this would have been a prime opportunity for that to happen. So he goes and they are bombarding with letters like this. They're talking back and forth. And all the time, this guy is trying to end the war. He is trying to stay alive. And this becomes a major problem. Harrison writes a letter to his mother and says, you have to find that guy Jeffries. He's been transferred home. He heard he'd been transferred home. So they find him and they ask him to write a document. Doesn't help. He doesn't say he's insane. He says he's got mental health issues. He's an alcoholic, but he's sane. So he's got the right sentence. So the next slide is this. If this wasn't my aunt and this crime wasn't our family's crime, I love this. I just think this is fantastic. This is on the White House stationery, and I found it at the FDR Museum. And you can read what it says. The father of the boy who was sentenced to death in Ireland, Harrison, is now here again without an appointment with his congressman. He says he wants to see you. In almost every bit of correspondence, they mention his legs are off. Okay. That changes your son's guilt? Nice try. We explained it's not a thing you could do, but the father said he isn't satisfied. The congressman is, of course, you start to see the sarcasm, seeing the Judge Advocate General. And this is Eleanor's handwriting. And what she wrote on it was, say that I saw his wife and did all I can do. There's nothing more I can do. Deepest regrets, etc. So she's not going to do anything about this. And we don't have the date on this, but the next memo that we had is also from the White House. This is the critical ending point. This is the last nail in the coffin for Harrison. This is the memo from, what was his name? Richard Park. He was a military aide to FDR. And he sends this to Colonel Davenport, who's in the Judge Advocate General's office, and he says, that regarding this case, the president will not even consider reviewing the case. That's it. It's done. So now the execution can move forward. So now the next slide is going to show you. Now, this is actually a picture from the Dirty Dozen movie. I don't know if you guys I'm sure there's a lot of arguments, right? Yeah. But other than the fact that this is obviously, what's the name? Lee Marvin. So, but what this does show is the British military system of hanging. So if you don't see the coils, you see his feet are bound, you see his hands are bound, and you see it's either the commandant or it's the commandant reading off the charge sheet, and you see the chaplain. So what you see here is the exterior of the execution chamber, which we were in today, and So what happens at Shepton Mallet is that on April 7th, Harrison is scheduled to be executed. So they have done this, they planned this out meticulously. They assemble the witnesses. Now these witnesses are officers that have been asked to be volunteers to witness this. There's no saying no. There are records that some of them painted, which we don't blame them. So at 12 o'clock, they are gathered at a place in the prison, and they are given a feast with canned beer, the best of food. And Albert Pierpont wrote a fantastic autobiography. And what he says in it, he says, I'm basically horrified by this, that we in this country are not eating well during the war, and they have the best of everything. It's, I guess, a consolation prize. They're like, you're going to watch somebody die, but here, have a feast first, and have a beer. So he finds it very disturbing. Plus, the UK procedure, which I acted out today, the condemned cell is here, the execution chamber, the hanging chamber is right next door. And Albert says that it should take 8 to 20 seconds for the condemned, for him to enter the condemned cell, tie his hands behind his back. Walk here, down into this room, onto the white chalk mark. They bind his feet. They put the hood over his head. They put the noose on, which has a brass ring and a piece of soft leather here. They tighten it, and they trip the lever. That should be 8 to 20 seconds. And that's what he feels is humane. That is not what the U.S. Army does. The U.S. Army, again, that word is dishonor. We're going to make an example and show you exactly what you've done to us, and we're going to show you that this is not ever going to happen to anybody else. It's an example. Not that the death penalty is a deterrent, that this is, you're going to know in your last breath that you messed up. What the Army does is they have the commandant there. He reads off the complete general court-martial sheet. He strips all rank and insignia off his uniform. He is dishonorably discharged from the military. He has forfeited his $60 a month allowance. He has forfeited his $22 to his mother, $25 to his father. And that is all taken away. That takes basically 8 minutes. So, and then he really thought that was really way too long. So Thomas Pierpont that's Thomas Pierpont. He's the head executioner. His assistant was Herbert Morris. At this time, Thomas is 74 years old. He has been doing this for almost 30 years. 40 years, and he has how many?
300.
300 executions under his belt. You know what you're doing, right? So this is Colonel French McLean. He's retired. He wrote a book called The Fifth Field. And initially, I found this book because the BBC wrote an article in 2018, and they had misinformation in it. And I wrote to them and blasted them about it, and they fixed it in 5 minutes to their credit. And I just did an interview with the same reporter. It should be coming out on Saturday. And so he didn't hold a grudge. I didn't either. So this is from French's book, and it shows the ring. It shows this soft piece of leather, and it shows the straps, and it shows the hood. So what they would do is they would be at the prison no later than 4:30 the day before the execution. That was the rule for the crown executioners. They would, on the sly, they would observe the condemned. And what they were looking for was his neck. They wanted to see, was it thick? Did he have any deformities? And they would write that down. Then they would go to the prison physician, and they would get that prisoner's height and weight. They would go to his separate room. They would pick the rope. They had sandbags of different weights. In Harrison's case, he was 5'7", and he was 136 pounds. I don't know what that is in stone. Got it? So they tie a sandbag that was probably 135 pounds, and they stretch the rope to take out the recoil so he doesn't bounce. And they let that stretch for hours. So they go, and at 12 o'clock, everybody assembled. At 1:59, the crew, the commandant, the chaplain, who was probably in with Harrison at this point, they go in to the condemned cell and they bind his hands behind his back. They escort him to the execution trap door. There's a white X mark. He stands on it. They bind his feet. They ask him, they do the reading out and everything, and they say, Commandant says to him, do you have any final words? So what he says is this. He says to the Commandant, yes, I would like you to try and see my mother and father, and I'm happy to pay for my crime. His chaplain asks the same thing. And he says, only that you try to see my mother and father and explain things to them. So this is so well documented. There is no chance of people not understanding the process. So what I want you to remember in this phase is I want you to remember what you read, because later on I'm gonna ask you another question about it. So what they do is this rope comes around, they put the noose over, they put the hood over, they put the noose over. The ring is here at the left ear, and after this part of the conversation, the chaplain starts a prayer. There is a silent signal at the first word of that prayer between Thomas Pierpont and the Commandant. Commandant just simply nods his head. Thomas throws the lever. Harrison drops. So in the British custom, they for civilians, they used to let them hang for an hour. That was their custom. They would go and have breakfast and do whatever. Because they did this early in the morning so that it wouldn't disturb the other prisoners and that the condemned didn't have to hang around all day and wait. I apologize, you shouldn't get more of those. So what happens is, trapdoor goes. This ring swings fast around to the front of the chin, snaps the head back, causes a hangman's fracture between C1, C2, or C2 and C3. It severs the spinal column. There's no nervous conduction below the chest. His diaphragm can't move. His heart stops beating, but not fast, because there's electrical impulse that's just left. Muscle, chemicals going to the muscle, whatever. Done right, it can be done. He can be declared dead in 3 to 6.5 minutes. He took 20 minutes to die. I am very happy that happened, but that's just me. So what happens is he was declared dead at 22 minutes. Now it's not in the record here, but his defense attorney told me that the doctor left the hanging chamber, went down the stairs that we saw today, and then he went into the lower part of that brick building and did check his heart by stethoscope 3 times before they could declare him dead. So our question that Dave and I are morbidly fascinated with, is that, was this on purpose? Because, like we said, he's been doing this for 40 years. He's done over 300 of them. You're really good at it by now. Why did this fail? So he's 74, and he had multiple complaints about his conduct, his attitude, and possible drinking. And Albert Pierpont and Henry Pierpont, who started the family legacy, were adamantly opposed that alcohol should be anywhere near the execution prior to the execution. You could have as many drinks as you wanted afterward, but alcohol, it was not professional. So that was a very suspicious thing that happened. The next year, he retires. He does 2 more executions here, and they are not short either, but they're not as long as 20 minutes. And the Crown simply stopped sending him requests for his services, and Albert takes over as the main executioner. I'm going to try not to go on a massive rant, because I really detest Master Sergeant John C. Woods. And if anybody has seen Nuremberg, the movie, at the very end of the movie, there's a hanging. And when that came on, I saw the cowboy noose. And I went, no! And I knew who it was going to be. And he does the hanging, but you see the rope quivering. which means he's strangling this guy to death. He runs down the stairs and he grabs him by the waist. He pulls down to kill him. And I was like, oh, great. So John C. Woods said he had experience with 2 executions in Texas. Liar, liar, pants on fire. So he initially went into the Coast Guard. He was dishonorably discharged for mental illness. So what does he do? He joins the Army. They take him. So he is doing executions and he's botching them all over the place. Army starts looking into it. And in April 1945, they discover that he was dishonorably discharged. But now it's at the end of the war. But he did do some of the Nuremberg hangings. So I don't like him. So then we have Pierpont, and then we have this question. Did he do this on purpose? Did he know what Harrison had done? Did he know it was a child, and was this payback? We don't have the answer, but we're looking into it. So we did the final words, discharge. So what they do is, we did the final words, okay, so we're at 20. So we're at the chaplain's report. Now this is where it gets interesting, because what they did was they take him down and they take him across the street across the hall to the morgue. They strip his uniform off and they bury him in a 99-cent Sears and Roebuck mattress cover that is blue and white striped. So Sears and Roebuck was a huge department store and had a huge catalog in the United States. They even sold houses. So they would use the cheapest thing and put his body in it, and they transported him to Cambridge American Cemetery for mortuary services, and then they take his body to Brookwood, which is in Surrey. And he says that he writes the letters. We don't know whether he went to see Harrison's parents, but the interesting thing is this person was in Cambridge, and we think this was the girlfriend. And I haven't been able to find her. But, so the death certificate is issued, telegram goes to the parents, non-battle related incident, and he is now buried in, this is his death certificate. Please remember you saw this. He goes to Brookwood Cemetery, and here's where the dishonor goes even more, because the American's honorable dead is buried over here. But if you look, he's behind, there's a plot that is just for the dishonored dead American soldiers. It's behind a maintenance shed, and to my eternal happiness, it was a compost heap. So that's where the 18 from Shepton Mallet went. So in 1949, the Army decides they have the dishonored dead scattered across all the different theaters of the war, and they want to consolidate them because they don't want them dishonoring these brave men who died fighting for our country. So they create this at the Wazan American Cemetery, Plot E, which is also known as the 5th field. It is a walled-off section. There is no name. It's just that little marble number. There are 96 soldiers that are there. Actually, 2 of them are disinterred and sent back to their families at their request. One was somebody that was executed here, Alex Miranda. He was a Mexican-American from California, really bad temper, very disrespectful, was shot, should have been hanged, and his family requested his body in 1990, and when they disinterred him, his body was almost pristine. There was very little decomposition. The other one, in 1987, was Private Eddie Slovik. His wife requested his body be repatriated. So in this part of the cemetery, you have to get permission from the American Battle Monuments organization to visit it. They don't grant that very often. And there's no visitors, no American flag can fly over this, no taps. And they have buried these guys so that their heads are here, their feet are here, so that they don't face the honorable dead in the other part of the cemetery. That's how serious they take this. This is what they call an anti-memorial plot, so that they have no honor. They're forever in villainy. So now we come to the rumors part, which is the hardest part for our family. So you saw his death certificate. You heard his last words. You know where he was buried. You know where he was reburied. Is there any doubt that this man is dead? No. Unfortunately, people told our grandparents their version of the truth. One guy told them that 2 weeks after the trial, they saw him get on a ship in Belfast, and he was sent back to the United States. Other people said that he was sent back. Why would they execute an American over a wee Irish girl? So they're never going to do that. They gave him the frontline alternative. If you were in the United States and you had a trial, and at the time of the war, they said you can go to prison or you got the frontline alternative. If you go to Germany and you're in the front and you survive, your sentence is gone. That didn't happen either. But that relentless questioning caused a serious amount of doubt, especially in my grandmother's mind. And so she writes this letter. No, not this letter. This is what they sent her, though. They sent this letter saying, "We deeply regret the crimes committed by William Harrison. He was hanged on April 7th. Our deepest sympathy." And so she gets this letter, and she still has doubt. This is in the paper. They deliberately put announcements that he was executed. Number one, it's a very small thing. Number two is, how many people want the newspaper in 1945 when you're really struggling for money? I don't know that my grandparents would have gone out and bought the paper every single day. Even if they bought it once a week, they may have missed this. So this was an interesting thing I found very recently, and this was from the BBC, Your Place and Mine, Tyrone Clonto Air Force Base, and there was a comment section about this article. So this is what we've been living with, and this is why we're here, and this is why I'm doing this, despite the fact that my mother really doesn't want me to. My mother asked me not to publish. I have a book that I'm trying to get published. She asked me not to do it, to publish it till after she's dead. And that was probably 1998, 99. Well, I just told her she was going to be 91. So I said, 2 years ago, I go, Mom. No, I didn't say. I said, listen, we are sick and tired of going. She doesn't Google her sister's name. We do. And we see everything that comes up and everything that's wrong. And we ask people to correct it, but a lot of it's printed. It's not going to be a new edition. So we're stuck with all of the rumors and innuendos. So this is actually a comment from the pub, Dorman's pub, where Harrison hung out before and after the murder, one of those children. So she says, "My father, Michael, and his twin brother found the body of the young girl down at Blake's farm," which is not right either, I guess. The story goes that men were using a thrashing machine in the middle of the field. What time did I tell you they found the body? Midnight. Nobody's thrashing that I know of. Anyway, so they went to the middle of the field and found the young girl murdered near a haystack. They both testified, which they did, and a U.S. soldier was executed in Somerset, England, 1 year later. True. But then she says, the next day after the murder, the soldier came down to the pub for a drink. My father asked the soldier what were the marks on his hand, and the soldier replied he had a fight with a soldier down at the Killycolby post office. Little did he know at the time that he was the murderer of the child. It's not correct. That's not what happened. There is a similar thing, because her father did encounter Harrison on the road right after the murder, did see his hand, talked to him briefly, and Michael went down to doing his job, and Harrison went back to the pub. So that's one thing. And then it says, where is the fun part?
it says, the article is very biased about this, and they said, the occupation by the Yankees was just like the occupation of the Brits. It was not good for our bow and the surrounding area. It was bad, very bad. So they didn't like the Yankees. If you were a friend of the British and you didn't like the British, the Americans were your enemy too. And that's also what they encountered. And somebody else makes a comment and says, we were at Dorman's pub when the Jeep with the child's body on the back stopped at the pub. The girl's name is Wylie. That, they found the body and they removed it at 5:30 in the morning. Pub's not open. Nice try. But people's memories are people's memories. And they will swear by it. So my father recalls a story of a local 6-year-old girl being murdered by one of the soldiers. He remembers it being covered up and the soldier responsible being whisked back to America. This is, in the news. So, this was just, part of it. So, and that was 2006, 2007, people were saying this. So, what happened with my grandmother on the bus, shortly after the murder, she's on the bus to Cookstown, and 2 men she knows sit behind her on the bus. And one of them says, it's a pity what happened to that wee girl, but that's what you get when you're a Yankee lover. My grandmother stood up, and she gave them peace of her mind. But like my cousin said earlier, she was traumatized by that. How can you say that to the mother of a murdered child? It was just cruel. So what happens is there's now a history of depression. My grandmother was in a depression for 2 years. She had just had a baby. Depression runs on her side of the family, depression and anxiety. And how do you function with a newborn and young children, and you're depressed and you can't think, and there's a stigma? Your husband has a heart condition, which he did, and it worsened. So in effect, Harrison killed Patsy in real life, but he ended the life of our grandfather because he died 13 years later. And when you look, I can't even bring myself to put a picture of it because you would think that man was 90 years old because it aged him so badly. And people were just not nice about it. So this followed everybody because that murder scene is a quarter mile from the house. We were just there last week. You have to go to school, you have to pass it. You have to go to the store, you have to pass it. And our cousin Kevin bought a house, and now his side yard is that field. But the nice part was that his son, Kieran, had his 3 red-headed boys playing around it. And he said, isn't it nice to see some sort of joy back in this field with these children? And I was like, yeah, this does bring some of the happiness back. So stigma has followed them. It's a very interesting thing that, we went to, my cousin Sean and I went to a music festival in Pole Island in 1999, and I started really researching them. And we were sitting outside, and his friend comes over, and Sean introduces me, and the guy says, whose people are you? And I said, this is my mother. And he says, that's one of them Wylies that little girl was murdered. How do you know? You weren't even born. He goes, everybody knows. I was like, okay, great. And it just doesn't go away. So you can imagine, from my mental health standpoint, how bad this has a negative effect on the whole family. And at some stage, every single one of the surviving children has a problem with alcohol. Not continuously, but they're self-medicating. And so that becomes a part of our family's legacy. So one of the most interesting things that happens is that Uncle Joe's boys are a nickname for the 465th Fighting Squadron at Clonto. And Joseph Wager Smith, I think he was a major, he and the boys got together in December of 1944, and they raised money. And they gave this money with a letter that's in the transcript. And it says, just to your wonderful family who's shown us such great hospitality, just a little bit of cheer to make your life easier. They got $520 pounds. That the equivalent in American money today is $33,000. And my grandfather couldn't work half the time because of his heart. So this was a windfall. Problem was, my grandfather said this was blood money. He wanted nothing to do with it. The rumor was that some part of Patsy was missing, and that this was a reparation made by the American government. It wasn't. It was just these soldiers feeling so horrible about what one of their own had done that they gave them this money. What happens after that is my grandmother she doesn't know what to do with it. She's very torn. She knows that they could use it, but she doesn't want to use it. So she goes to the parish priest, and he says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it for you. And if you need some, you come ask me for it." So there's a letter that we found where my grandmother had written to her sister in America, and she says, every time I go, I have to beg for a little bit of money for seed potatoes or hayseed or any other kind of thing. He says, well, I'm holding on to it, against the day that you might want to go back to America. I'm holding it, just for a rainy day. And Granny's line was, we'll all be dead before the rain comes. And then one of our family members, who I won't name because I never spoke to her, so one of them went to the parish priest when they heard about the money and said, don't give it to the family. My grandfather will drink it all. Now, I don't know how a family member does that. I don't have confirmation that he was an alcoholic. I know that he would love to have a pint, but it was just a cruel thing for a family member to do, that's for sure. Stigma is just a huge thing. My grandmother was so depressed that she couldn't see. Patsy's favorite thing was a doll, and she could not bring herself to let the other children play with it, so she sent it to her sister Margaret in the Bronx. Margaret held on to it until, unfortunately, her apartment was robbed and that doll was stolen. So Margaret was particularly distressed by this whole thing. And in April of 1945, she wrote a letter to my grandmother, and she said, I had a vision of a man hanging from a tree in my garden. And this was April 1945. And she believed that Harrison was haunting her. And it was to the point where a check went missing, and it was found in Harrison, New York, and she thought that was deliberately done. And we were like, okay. The interesting thing was, in America, nobody took, like my grandmother didn't have to see anything. She didn't have to talk to anybody about it, so she escaped the stigma. My family and Kelly Colby did not. So they're very willing to talk about it. She's not, because obviously it's a very painful thing. But I said to her, you have to understand that this needs to be set straight. That it's not appropriate. That all of this stuff is in print and it's not challenged. So my husband said something to me. I'll let you tell this part of the story. The stigma about, because my husband is German American. I'm Irish American. Scott's Irish American. And so my husband's family was in Germany during World War II. His two uncles were soldiers for the German army. They both died very young. And his father was 15 years old at the end of the war. He was a troop transport glider pilot. He actually said, and this was just a week or so ago. You say that.
I just want to be sure I'm talking
about it. Yes.
Yeah, about how Hitler killed my uncles on my father's side and made my life difficult as a German immigrant in New York, living amongst Jews and other people who had suffered so badly at the hands of the Nazis. So Hitler made my side of the family victims, and he made this family victims, because had Hitler not conquered Europe, Harrison and the others would have never been in the UK. So there's so many of us here, we're touched by it, but here's very personal examples on this end.
Yeah, so it's widespread, and it's just this is why this is very healing. We're the first family members to have come to this prison to see the place that he died. Dave said, "How do you feel?" And I said, triumphant. And I said, elated. I really thought I was going to be very upset and cry. But I think to a person that were here, we all had the same feeling. We had no trouble eating lunch after we left. So the next slide. Somebody's lying. Now, this pissed me off. My husband hired a genealogist in Ohio, and we found this particular document. We found out also that somebody's lying, because what does it say? Young American Patriots. I would not recognize Harrison in this picture. Not at all, but it's him. So here we go with the lies, and please forgive my sarcasm. Number one, he was not a pilot. And then I said, okay, he piloted just once. He never flew a plane. He was a mechanic. He was 22 years old. He did enter the service at that time. He was in McClellan Field. He was never in North Africa. He was wounded in the line of duty in England. No, he wasn't. He had an appendectomy. Or, let's talk about the time he had bottles of beer in his pocket, was so drunk he fell over a stone wall and cut his arms. Is that in the line of duty? Yeah, on the line of duty of going to the pub. So, yes, he did die April 7th. And this is what cracks me up. Attended hanging. He did. That's true.
Yes.
Don't. But that's the name of his high school. Hanging Rock High School in Ohio. You want to talk about weird. I'm assuming he was Methodist. Have fun with that. No problem. What the genealogist did find that 12 years after Harrison was executed, his parents had a daughter. And we tried very hard to get in contact with her. We reached out. She ended up that she had twin girls at the age of 16, and then she had a son, William. Now, we think that because her father's name was William and her brother's name was William, that maybe she named the son after her. But we managed to find her very recently. I say we. My chief researcher found her on LinkedIn. And he wrote her an email, and he just generally said, we're doing research on William Harrison Jr., who's your uncle, and do you know anything about him? And she said no. I said, I'm writing a book about it. And in between her next answer, she obviously Googled him and found out exactly what he did. Because she said, I only knew that I had a brother or an uncle who died in the war. So what's she going to assume? He died in battle, right? So she found out the hard way about this, and she said that horrible crime. And she said, I've been estranged from my family for over 20 years. I do not speak to my mother. I do not speak to my father. She doesn't speak to her sister. And she doesn't speak to her brother, which is probably a really good thing. And she said that it's just too much trauma, and she unfortunately did not want to be interviewed, and we just have to respect that, right? Well, we looked up the brother. William McComas was his last name, and I was almost going to embed the video. There's a video that Peter found of him being arrested in Wisconsin for burglary and car theft, and the videos of him running from the police, like abandoning the car. And then there's a mugshot that I showed Dave today.
Yeah.
He does not look like a sane person. So that trauma stayed. There was also another brother that was born, I guess, 2 years after the sister. We couldn't find her. The genealogist never found him. So that trauma obviously has stayed. So it wasn't just our family. I care less about his family. But in the interest of fairness, I wanted to represent that part of it. And there's nothing I can do about that. So my cousins who live in Killicolton still have put this memorial in the newspaper on her 80th anniversary, and they also put this on the grave too. They've also recently put a ceramic teddy bear And somebody, they just told me, we were at the cemetery last week, and they said somebody who has a relative nearby came over and said, well, what's with the teddy bear? And they said, well, Patsy buried there. They said, we didn't think she was buried there. So it brought up interest, like more misinformation is basically what it was. So this is basically why we're here. Shepton Mallet was the last place that our aunt got justice, that this man met his rightful end, and so we needed to be here for that. And that really, this is the place that she got justice. And it's really sad that my grandparents didn't know that, to be sure. And that's why I asked you, you saw all these documents stating he said, you know for a fact he said, there are still people in that community that do not believe him. So, yeah. So this is our sweet girl. So the next one is, thank you. I thank you all for coming, because you're the first ones outside of the family to hear this, and the fact that you showed so much interest and respect means a lot to all of us. Robert Lilly has helped me through tremendously with my writing and research. We recently just met him for the first time in Kentucky. Colonel French McLean, I didn't kill him. He was a nice guy. He's given me permission to use the pictures. He's been very supportive. I can't thank Charlie and Dave and Jenny and Monica for allowing us to do this, because they didn't have to. Dave is my partner in crime. No pun intended. And then we do help. We really thank the Wylie family for allowing me to do this, because in a way, I was the only one who could write this. I was older. I have the mental health degree. I was able to dissociate from the horrific nature of reading my aunt's autopsy report and what was actually done to her, and so I could write it down. So we really thank you guys for coming. And that's the end of my talk. So what we'll do is, if you have any questions, you can ask away. If not, thank you very much.
As in May, it's ghosts in the courtroom.
Ooh, I want to go. Let me just tell you one thing about the ghost aspect. We've had a lot of people weren't interested in the paranormal part of this. I am very much into the paranormal. My cousins are. We've had readings with a psychic, and Harrison has come through, and he is angry. And he doesn't want the book published. And he actually, I was in Belfast after walking in the field with the psychic, with my cousins, and I couldn't sleep because I felt like this presence was looming over me. I wasn't anxious. I was terrified. I got up and put the light on. And my cousin Evelyn had a very similar experience the day before. So the fact that he keeps coming through and saying, he's holding up a sign that says civil rights. Like, I should have been put in jail for the rest of my life and not executed. Oh, well, so sorry. But today in the prison, we were in C Wing, and there were certain places that I felt like fear, especially down the hallway with the bathroom in the visitor center. My stomach went, ooh. And so we were in C Wing, and Dave is telling the story. He goes into a cell, and his brother Mark is behind me, my husband's behind me. And I'm walking towards him, and I heard a female voice. And I don't know what she said, because she only said it once, but it was right here. And it sounded something like that quick, short phrase. And then I was like, oh, and I got goosebumps. And I said to Mark, did you say something? Went into the cell, heard his story of his experience with a female warder. And then I come back out, and we're just about getting ready to leave, and I feel a gentle tug on the back of my hair. And I'm like, okay. So yes, so there is that aspect. My grandmother had a visitation dream 2 years after Patsy was killed. She was in this deep depression, and she says that she was in this dream. She heard a knock on the door. She went to the front door, and there's Patsy. Now, Patsy was actualized to her prime of like 15, 16, and she had a ring of flowers in her hair, which was very significant because when she was alive, she loved to make daisy chains. So there's a picture of a daisy on her grave. So she says, Patsy, where you been? You know, I've been so worried about you. Where you been? And of course, in these visitation dreams, their lips don't move, but they communicate what they need to say. And it's like, Mommy, I'm okay. I'm great. I'm where I need to be. I'm not suffering. You need to take care of the children. And that's what lifts my grandmother out of her depression, was that visitation dream. So there's that aspect of it too. We knew that today is the execution chamber. Oh, was he pissed we were there. Oh, was he pissed. He was also pissed that we were in the field with the psychic. But we had a couple of choice words that I will not say. Normally I would, but I didn't. But again, thank you.
Yeah, please do consider coming to the next one. We've got a magistrate coming to visit us, and she's going to talk